So we have been discussing about the 2 by 2 by 1, the standard neoclassical trade model, the Ricardian model. The first one is the Ricardian model. Okay. So Ricardian model was described by David Ricardo in his book, The Principles of Political Economy and Taxation. So Ricardo talked about comparative cost advantage, and we have already discussed that under the assumption of constant cost and CRS. Comparative cost advantage also implies comparative advantage. Okay, in the Ricardian model, no such distinction was made. It was made later on. Now we have already discussed the assumption, so I'm not again elaborating. So we have all the standard neoclassical assumption, and we have also discussed the. So we have 2 by 2 by 1. So two country, home country and foreign country producing two goods using one factor of production. So labor is the only factor of production in the Ricardian model, and we have assumed a fixed coefficient production technology. So fixed coefficient production technology means the amount of labor required to produce 1 unit of a particular good remains unchanged. Doesn't matter how much of the good is produced, 10 units or 1000 units, the per unit labor requirement remains unchanged. So the per unit labor denote as ALJ, where J is equal to C and T. J is the jth good. So we have two goods here, computer and textile. So ALJ is equal to means ALC and ALT. Now we have assumed that the two goods are produced using different techniques. That means the labor requirement in the two goods are different. ALJ and means ALC and ALTs are different. And the labor requirement of the countries are also different, because in the Ricardian model, the only source of comparative technological difference. Okay, so technological difference that is represented in terms of the labor requirement. So we have already discussed. So if you just go back and we wrote down the equilibrium output level, XC and XT, and the zero profit conditions in the pre-trade situation. And in the pre-trade situation, we find that the relative price reflects the labor theory of value. So pre-trade price ratio is the ratio of the labor embodied in the two goods, and it is independent of domestic demand. So in the before trade situation, domestic demand doesn't play any role, because the price is entirely determined by cost. So if you remember, we have already discussed that while distinguishing between comparative cost advantage and comparative advantage, because here you are assuming constant cost. Constant cost means your long run supply curve is horizontal. This constant cost industry, as well as you have CRS throughout. CRS throughout, because you have fixed coefficient production function, and labor is the only factor of production. So there is no law of return to law of diminishing return to the variable factor is not applicable here. Okay, so you don't have the law of diminishing return to the variable factor. You have CRS throughout, because labor is the only factor of production. So if you have to change output, then you have to change labor. There is no distinction between the fixed factor and variable factor here. Labor is the, and you have constant cost. So under constant cost and CRS, your entire price is entirely cost determined. It is independent of domestic demand, as we have already seen. So if suppose this is the initial demand, then also price is a P bar. If demand changes, then also price remains unchanged. So price ratio depends only on the amount of labor requirement. Okay, because this is how you get the price, relative price. The price is equal to the average cost is equal to marginal cost, right? So this is your average cost. So relative price is the ratio of the amount of labor which has gone into producing the two goods. It doesn't depend on the domestic demand, which is very important. Okay, because if you remember, we have already discussed that the neoclassical trade models, they are supply side models. Now in the consider another foreign country which is similar, otherwise similar, only difference in the foreign country is the technology asymmetry. By technology asymmetry, we mean that foreign country has relative superiority in one of the sector. Let's say in computer. Suppose India is the home country and US is the foreign country. So foreign country has a comparative advantage or relative superiority in producing computer. So we define that in terms of the input coefficient or the labor coefficient. Okay. So this means that foreign country has comparative advantage in producing computers, whereas home country has comparative cost advantage in producing textile. So see, even if say ALC is greater than LC star and LT may be greater than LT star, that means foreign country can have absolute advantage in both the goods separately. Okay, but in terms of relative, so the relative superiority may not be the same, and we have already illustrated it with the example of the lawyer and secretary. Okay, so I think we have discussed till this far in the last class. May be having absolute disadvantage in both the commodities because LC may be greater than LC star and LT may be greater than LT star. So if your unit labor requirement is less, that means you have relative superiority. So foreign country may have a superior technology in producing both the goods, but the relative superiority may not be the same. Foreign countries' relative superiority may be greater in computer. So that's why see we are writing it in terms of ratio. LC by ALT is greater than LC star by LT star. Of labor required to produce 1 unit of computer with respect to the amount of labor required to produce 1 unit of textile is greater in home country than in foreign country. Okay. So when trade opens up by this assumption, so this is your assumption. You can change the assumption, you get the opposite result. So by this assumption, the home country will export textile and import computer, because when trade takes place, and we have already discussed them, because in the home country can produce textile at a lower cost and price, because here price is entirely cost determined. So if the price is less, cost is less, price will also be less. So if home country can produce textile cheaper and foreign country can produce computer at a cheaper cost, then home country will buy computer from textile. In home country there will be excess supply of computer, and textile, and there will be excess demand for textile, so price will change accordingly, right? So there will be higher relative price of textile in the foreign country, and that will encourage the producers to expand textile production at home and encourage import of cheaper computer from foreign country. And there will be resource reallocation. So by resource we mean labor only, because labor is the only factor of production. So labor will, in home country, labor will and so labor will come from computer sector, because to start with you assume full employment. Okay, so initial price difference will be wiped out through arbitrage and movement of goods across these two countries, and again price will be equal. So post-trade price will be equal. So when post-trade price is equal, then there is that you get the final traded amount. Okay. In the before trade situation, the prices are different, and that is the source of comparative advantage. But when trade opens up, then is no intervention by any third party, only the producers and consumers see the prices. So the domestic producer of textile see that in the foreign country price of textile is higher, so they will be motivated to produce more textile and sell it abroad. The home consumers will see that the price of computer falls when trade opens up, because the computer is cheaper in foreign country. So domestic consumers will substitute dearer textile by cheaper computers. So it's only consumers, that means the self-interested economic agents, they just see the prices, movement of prices, and they act accordingly. So it's a free trade, there is no intervention, and such free trade is beneficial for the country. Okay, now let us see the post-trade price, what happens to the post-trade price. So for that let us write down the full employment conditions in the home country and foreign country. Okay, so employment means demand is equal to supply. Demand for labor is equal to the supply of labor. So in home country, say L bar is the amount of given endowment of labor. Okay. Now ALJ is the amount of labor required to produce 1 unit of jth good, and home country is producing XC and XT amount of the two goods. Okay. XC and XT amount of the two goods are produced in home country. Right? So what is the total labor demand in the home country? What will be the demand of labor for computer production? LC is the per unit requirement of labor in producing computer. And what is the total amount of computer production? That is XC. Right? So total demand for total demand for labor in computer sector is ALC XC. So ALC is the amount of labor required to produce 1 unit of computers, and XC is the total amount of computer produced. So ALC XC is the amount of labor demanded in computer. Similarly, ALT is the amount of labor demanded in textile production, 1 unit of textile production, and XT is the total amount of textile production. So ALT XT is the total amount of labor demanded in textile production. So LCXC plus ALTX total labor demand. So under full employment, labor demand is equal to labor supply. So LCXC plus LTXT is equal to L bar. Similarly, in foreign country also you can write down the full employment condition of labor. So in foreign country, say labor endowment is L bar star, and the foreign country has different these AIJs are different. So we are denoting the AIJs as AIJ star. Okay, so similarly we can also write down the full employment condition of labor in foreign country. Okay, and you also have the zero profit conditions. Earlier we have written already. So PTW by PCW will be what? So in the post-trade situation, you see in the post-trade situation, what will happen? In the post-trade situation, computer will be exported by the foreign country and textile will be exported by the home country. Right? So the relative price of textile or the relative terms of trade, commodity terms of trade, we use the notation W. That means the post-trade situation or world price. PTW by PCW is the world relative price of textile or the terms of trade. Okay, now which this will solve this PTW by PCW how? So price of textile is determined because textile is produced in the home country and computer will be produced in the foreign country. Now this will you have complete specialization in the two goods. So let us see how the two countries are completely specialized in the two goods. Okay. So and after that we'll come back to this post-trade terms of trade or the relative price. So let us first plot the PPF. So how will be the PPF? We were already discussing in the last class. How will the PPF look like? You have constant cost here. So what will be the shape of the PPF?
Downward sloping linear.
Downward sloping straight line, yes. So that means your PPF are nothing but this plot of the full employment conditions here, L bar and L bar star. Okay, now suppose we are plotting computer on the vertical axis and textile on the horizontal axis. So can you tell which one will be steeper? So L bar and L bar star if you plot. So the shape, relative shape of the PPF that will follow, that will depend on the assumption regarding the technological superiority, that foreign country has a comparative advantage in computer. So ALC by ALT is greater than ALC star by ALT star, right? So these are your full employment condition, and you are plotting computer on the vertical axis and textile on the horizontal axis. So what is the full employment lines? So we can find out that DXC by DXT, right, along L bar. So minus of DXT by DXT. So if you totally differentiate, what will happen? In the left hand side, what will be DL bar? L bar is the given endowment of labor, so there is no exogenous labor force at a particular point of time. So D of L bar will be what? 0, right? In the left hand side, if you totally differentiate this full employment condition, your left hand side DL bar will be equal to 0. In the right hand side, you have ALC DXC plus ALT DXT. Now what do you think? What will be the value of DAIJ or DALJ? You have fixed coefficient production technology. What will be the DALJ? Your fixed coefficient production technology means the amount of labor requirement, that means ALT will be unchanged. Doesn't matter how much of XT you are producing. So then what will be DALJ?
0.
0, yes, very good. Because you cannot, on the assumption of fixed coefficient, doesn't matter how much amount of XC you are producing or XT you are producing, your ALJ is unchanged. So D of ALJ is 0 under fixed coefficient production technology. So if you totally differentiate, then you get the slopes. So first one is the slope of the full employment condition, that means the home PPF, and the second one is the foreign PPF. Okay. So now you compare assumption of comparative advantage. So we can say which one will be steeper. So now ALT by ALC is the slope of the PPF of home country, and ALT star by ALC star is the slope of the PPF of the foreign country. So what was your assumption? Your assumption is ALC by ALT is greater than ALC star by ALT star. So that means which one will be steeper?
Home country PPF.
Will be steeper. So see, we are not comparing the intercepts, right? We are comparing the, so now see, if you change the assumption regarding the comparative, regarding your technology, the technological superiority, if you change the assumption, then the slope of the PPF will also change. Okay. So this is how you draw the PPF of the two countries. Okay. And you also assume in the standard neoclassical framework that there is no difference in the demand side. Okay, and you have, that means the same set of CIC will represent the both the foreign countries consumers preference or taste, and as well as the home countries consumers taste or preference. So you have the same set of CICs. So this is your home country PPF MN and foreign country star. And we can find out the autarkic situation. So autarky situation in the two countries are represented by A and A star. Okay, so A is the point of production and consumption in the home country, and A star is the point of production and consumption in the foreign country. So in the autarky there is no trade, okay, and point of production and consumption remains unchanged. Now when happen, so now in the post-trade situation, what is your relative price? Your relative price is this, which is shown by this dotted line, the slope of the dotted line m star n. Okay, so this will be the post-trade uniform relative price, which is shown by the absolute value of the slope of this line m star n. Therefore, what we see? So what will be the point of production and what will be the point of production in the two countries? See what happens here. If you go back and you go back to this assumption of comparative advantage that we made, okay, when trade opens up in the foreign country, the price of textile is greater. So the home producers of textile, they are encouraged to produce more textile. Whereas in foreign country, price of computer is less. So home consumers of computer, they are motivated to buy more of cheaper computers. Therefore, what is happening in the home country? In the home country, workers are moving out of the computer sector because in home country, production of computer will fall because home consumers are now buying cheaper computers from abroad. But the home high price of textile in foreign country. So home production of textile expands. Now when home production of textile expands, this expansion requires more labor, which will come from the foreign country, because in the autarkic situation, you see home country is also on the PPF. So that means full employment is maintained in the autarky in the home country. So therefore, when home country is expanding textile production, it needs more labor that is coming from computer sector. So computer sector is releasing labor. Okay. So in this way, in home country, production increases and computer production falls. So again, in this way, the price difference is wiped out, isn't it? Because as textile production in the home country increases, so the supply of home textile will increase, price will fall. And in home country, as the demand for computer increases, so price of computer will increase. So the price difference, the initial price difference, that will be wiped out in terms of the arbitrage and the movement of the goods across the countries. Now, not very different. So we'll also look at this case. What will happen if the countries are not countries are very different? Okay, so suppose for the time being you assume that the countries are more or less similar countries. So we know that the post-trade price will be in between the pre-trade prices PA and PA star. So the post-trade price PF will be lying strictly in between PA and PA star. So we have already studied in the earlier chapter on gains from trade. So how? Okay. Now comes the very important assumption of constant cost. You have constant cost and CRS. That means your shape of PPF is, it's a straight line. So that means when you are moving resources from computer to textile sector, you can do that without increasing your cost. So that means what? When textile price, when the home producer of textile, they are finding a high abroad and they are motivated to produce more. So how far they will go when trade opens up? So that means the home country will go down along the PPF, and so initially home country under autarky is at point A. At point A, its production and consumption is equal. Now when trade opens up, foreign countries PPF is home countries PPF is MN. So home country will move down along MN from point A, because home country producers are encouraged to. How long they will go on? Now they will go on till the point of complete specialization. That means the horizontal intercept of the PPF. Why? Because you can now expand production without incurring additional cost, because you have assumed constant opportunity cost or constant MRT. So that's why you are getting the result of full employment. So in the home country, the resources will be completely shifted from the comparative disadvantage sector to comparative advantage sector. So that means completely specialized in the production of textile. Just the opposite happens in the foreign country. Foreign producers are getting a higher price of computers. So see, the foreign producers will be moving from point A star towards point M star. For foreign country, the PPF is M star, N star. So foreign producers are moving towards this way. And they will do so until and unless all labor force, all resources are allocated to the comparative advantage sector. So both countries are the sector in which it has comparative advantage. So is it clear? So it entirely follows from the assumption of constant cost. So the two countries are completely specialized. So that is why what will happen when the countries are completely specialized. So the situation, then M star is the point of production of computer by the foreign country, and N is the point of production of textile in the home country, and point E. So this is your new price line is given by M star N. This is your new price line, and you have a CIC. Suppose this is UF post trade CIC, and you have assumed identical test. So this UF is for both home countries consumer as well as for foreign countries consumer. So the point of consumption will be between the home country, between the CIC and the price line of the two countries. Now no longer you need the CIC to be tangent on the PPF, right? Because that is the gains from trade. Free trade allows you to go beyond your PPF. Without any trade, you must consume on your PPF. But when trade opens up, you can consume beyond your PPF, right? So you are at point E, where the CIC UF is tangent to the price line M star N, because that is the trade should be balanced in the post trade situation, but you can go beyond your PPF, right? So we can now find out the amount of production and consumption of the two goods. So home country is producing how much amount of producing, you can find out the domestic production and consumption. Okay, so and the amount of export. So what is the production? Home country is producing this much amount, total amount is ON, production of textile. And what is the domestic demand for textile? Demand for textile is home countries consuming OB amount of textile. So this excess amount BN, what is that? That is the excess supply of textile. So BN is the export of textile. Okay. So home country is exporting BN unit of textile, and in turn it is importing how much amount of computer. So home country is also consuming computers. So computer by the foreign country is OM star, right? And this OB star amount is imported by home country, because see, home country is not producing any computer at all. So whatever is home country is consuming of computer, it is entirely imported. M star is the amount of, yeah, so this So this is your BN is the amount of your export of textile, and B star M star, this is your amount of import of your computer, right? This amount. By the property of similar triangle, you can also find out this BE. This is your amount of import. So OB star, which is your amount of basically import of computer, is equal to BE, which will be again equal to B star M star. Because see, again in the foreign country, what is happening? Foreign country is completely specialized in computer. So foreign countries' domestic demand for textile is entirely met or satisfied by home production, home export. So exporting of textile, this BN, that will be entirely consumed by the foreign country, right? So each country is completely specialized in producing the good in which it has a comparative advantage. So BN is the amount of export of textile by the home country, and BE is the amount of production, consumption of computer, right? Now this home country is not producing any computer, so home country is buying computer from abroad. So you can check that this BE is basically equal to OB, so B star M star. Okay, so home country is buying computer in exchange of its sale of textile. Just the opposite for the foreign country. Foreign country is buying textile in exchange of export of or sale of computers. Okay, so is it clear how we are getting this complete specialization in the post-trade situation? So from there follows relative price. So what will be PTW by PCW? See, this PTW, now the post-trade relative price. So at the post-trade situation, home country is producing PTW, only textile. So PTW is basically ALTW. The home country is zero profit condition for textile production. And what about PCW? PC means PC is determined, it is in the foreign country because foreign country is completely specialized in computer. So PCW is equal to ALC star into W star. W star is the get. Okay. So PTW by PCW is equal to LTW by ALC star W star. So this is the world relative price of textile or the world terms of trade. Okay, in terms of home country's export good, price of export in terms of price of export. So this is from the point of view of home country. Right? Now you can write down this double factorial terms of trade or the ratio of wage of the two countries, W by W star, home wage relative to foreign wage. So that will be equal to what? The home wage relative to foreign wage. This is called the double factorial terms of trade. It is determined by the commodity terms of trade, PTW by PCW, and the production technology, because LT is what? It is reflected in terms of the production technology. So the double factorial terms of trade is determined by the relative price or the commodity terms of trade and the production technology. Production technology for the two goods in which they completely specialize. So home country is completely specialized in textile and foreign country is completely specialized in computer. Okay. So here the most important thing is why the countries are completely specialized in the post-trade situation. So that follows from the assumption of constant cost. Now, will it happen always? Will the country be able to completely specialized always? Now, it may not be necessary. This only solution always. So we need some condition also. So before going to that, just let us see that's beneficial for the for both the countries, right, which is the gains from trade theorem. So if the countries are trading according to their comparative advantage, so we see that the autarkic CIC was say EUA, both the countries are able to achieve a higher CIC indexed UF, right? So that means it is welfare improving for both the countries. So free trade followed by both the countries, welfare by both the countries, right? UF is lying above UA for both the countries. So for both the countries, free trade is expanding the set of consumption because both the countries are producing according to their comparative advantage and they are completely specialized. So they are only producing the good in which the country is has relative strength. And by doing so, it can earn more and it can afford to buy the other good. Okay, so both the countries are also consuming. Now see, what if, suppose the countries are completely specialized, but the domestic demand for, say, let's say for the home country, suppose the domestic demand for computer is too high, which cannot be met by the export of computer by the foreign. Then what do you think? Then can the country be completely specialized? Like, see, you take the example of India's wheat production. India is a major producer of wheat, but you see that India also sometimes ends up importing wheat. Why? Because the domestic demand is very high. So even if you are producing more, but your demand is so high that your domestic production is not enough to satisfy your demand. Same thing can happen here also. So the good, say the home country is very has a very high demand for computer. So the foreign production, excess production of computer, so the what the home country is importing from the foreign country, that is not satisfied. Means the domestic demand for home country's computer is not satisfied by the import of computer from foreign country. Can the home country be completely specialized? Well, you have to satisfy your domestic consumers. What the home country will do now? It cannot be completely specialized. It has to produce both the goods, isn't it? Because import of computer in this case by the home country from the foreign country cannot meet its entire domestic demand. So that means the home country will not be able to completely specialize. So home country has to now produce both the goods, and then we'll show that if the country is not completely specialized, such large country will not enjoy any gains from trade, because here the gains from trade is coming from the fact that the post from the pre-trade prices. Okay, and you are, since you are completely specialized, so you are earning more and you are able to afford your consumption, increased consumption. But if you are not completely specialized and your price is equal to the pre-trade, your post-trade price is still equal to your pre-trade price, you will not be able to derive any gains from trade. So now we'll check of role of relative size of the trading partner. So now we'll check the importance of the role of relative size of the trading countries. Okay. So in a situation, if the country sizes are very different, we can show that the gains from trade will go to the relatively small country. Okay, and will not derive any gains from trade because the larger country will not be able to completely specialized. Okay, now we have to first define what do we mean by large country or small country. So for the open economies, the large country means the amount of excess demand or the amount of excess supply. So if the country is consuming and producing a lot of commodities and in very high amount, but it will be a small country. So you remember how it defined a small firm in perfect competition, the firm's ability to influence the world price. Same thing, how you define a country's smallness or largeness in the world market. That is the country's ability to influence the world price. Now that will happen depending on your amount of excess demand or excess supply. So suppose you are a major buyer. You are the importer of the good and you are a major buyer. So if your demand increases, what will happen? The price will go up. Similarly, if you are a major supplier of the good and you have a major high amount of excess supply, like Brazil in the market for coffee, exporter of the good, if you produce more, there will be excess supply, price will fall. So you define the smallness or largeness of a country in terms of the country's ability to influence the world price in that particular good. So it varies from market to market, for good to good. Like Brazil is a large country in the market for coffee, but Brazil may not be a large country in the market for, let's say, aircraft. So that depends on a particular good, right? A country may not be large in all the depending on the amount of excess supply or excess demand. So whether the country is able to influence the world price or move the terms of trade. Now, according to Ricardo, the gains from trade will go to the small countries. So if the two countries are trading, one is a large country, that is the country is able to influence the terms of trade, and the other is a small country, then in such a situation, the gains from trade will be enjoyed by the small country. Because we'll show that the large country will not be able to complete and it will not enjoy any improvement in the terms of trade and it will not gain. So we can now show it graphically. Okay. So if we go back to the standard PPF, so we have already studied the shape of the offer curve. We know how the post-trade relative price is determined. That is determined from the intersection of the two offer curves. So do you remember what will be the shape of the offer curve in this context when the downward sloping straight line? How will be the offer curve? Under constant opportunity cost, how will be the offer curve?
Ma'am, it will be a straight.
It will be straight line thoroughly or what?
Up to a point after which it will start backward.
Yeah. Yes. So up to a point, that point corresponds to the pointer, right? Because it can shift resources from one sector to another sector without requiring any improvement in terms of trade. Up to the point of complete specialization, up to it has shifted all the resources or devoted all the resources in the production of one good. So let's say for the home country, so we are plotting the offer curve. In the horizontal axis, it is export of textile and the vertical axis, it is import of computer. So corresponding to this straight line PPF, your offer curve will have a linear segment up to this point N. So this corresponds to the point of complete specialization. At this point, you are producing only textile at this point. And after that, what will happen? After that, it will be the standard slope convex downward, because after that, if you want to export more, and this XT is the gap between domestic production and supply. So this is your nothing but your excess supply. So in the production side, as we have already discussed, in the production side, we cannot produce more than this amount of textile, ON amount of textile. This is the largest possible amount of textile that the, because it has already devoted all its resources in producing textile. So without any increase in endowment or without any technological improvement, it cannot produce more amount of textile. But it can export more by reducing the consumption. But that requires improvement in terms of trade. That means price to be increased. We know by law of demand, if price of textile increases, the consumption of textile falls, and then your excess supply amount can increase, because your excess supply is the gap between. So production unchanged, if your consumption falls, then also you can increase your export. So beyond this point of complete specialization, the offer curve will have a non-linear segment like the standard one, convex downward. Okay, so this is how we have drawn the two offer curves. Okay, so initially you see this OKH is the home country's offer curve and OK0 star F is the foreign country's offer curve, and the post-trade terms of trade will be given by the slope of the line joining CO and say E0. Okay. Now suppose the foreign country is very large and we length of this linear segment in this offer curve that depend on the what? Country's ability to produce more of this one good. So as the country can produce more of textile, if it devotes all its resource, then larger will be this linear segment in the offer curve. Now suppose the foreign country is a large country. Okay. Now if the foreign country is a large country, and so it's linear segment corresponding to its complete specialization in computer will be greater. Okay. So the terms of trade, so the foreign offer curve is no longer this OK0 star F. It is now an elongated one. Suppose the new foreign offer curve is OK1 star F. Sorry, there was a phone call. So okay, suppose you consider the case where the large country, the foreign country, sorry, foreign country is a large country. So the offer curve is OK1 star F dash. Okay, now no longer E0 is your equilibrium. Suppose the new equilibrium is at E1. Okay, so what will happen? What will be the terms of trade? The terms of trade will be the at point E1, because your home offer curve is unchanged. Home offer curve is OKH. Now the foreign offer curve is OK1 star F dash. So home offer curve intersects the foreign offer curve at point E1. So what is the new terms of trade line? New terms of trade is given by OE1. Now you see, what can we say about the terms of trade improvement for the two countries? Is there any terms of trade change for the foreign country? Because for the foreign country, there is no improvement in terms of trade, isn't it? This new terms of trade OE1, it just coincides with the foreign country's offer curve. So there is no improvement in the terms of trade, right? So therefore, the home country will be completely specialized, but the foreign country now has to produce both the goods, because home country's export of textile will not be able to satisfy import demand for textile. So foreign country has to produce both textile and computer. Okay, so if what will happen if you now argue that what is the problem if the home foreign country is completely specialized in computer? See, if the foreign country is completely specialized in computer, first of all, as we are discussing, its demand, its domestic demand for textile cannot be satisfied by home country's export supply of. if the foreign country is able to produce very large amount of computer by being completely specialized, so that this vertical axis is more elongated, vertical intercept is more elongated for the foreign country, what will happen? There will be too much production of computer, and home countries and the domestic production of computer by the foreign country will not be able to the home country will not be able to purchase so much amount of computer, because demand for computer is less. So if the foreign country which can produce a very large amount of computer, when it is completely specialized in computer, there will be no takers for that. Okay, so this large foreign country cannot be completely specialized, because if it produces only computer, it produces too much of computer which it cannot sell, and its demand for textile is also not being satisfied. So now what it will devote its resources between the two sectors. It will also have to produce some amount of textile, so that its amount of computer production is also less. Therefore, the foreign country in this situation is now forced to be incompletely specialized. Incomplete specialization means you are producing both the goods, and it cannot take the advantage of price difference. So see, as we have already discussed, the reason behind gains from trade is what? The reason behind post-trade situation, the prices move in such a way that you can buy cheaper amount of the import good, and you can sell the costlier amount of the export good. But if you are not able to do that, you are not able to enjoy the gains from trade, so you are not benefiting from such free trade, right? Because your pre-trade price and post-trade price in this case is the same. So you consider the case where the foreign country is a large country, so that its amount of complete specialization, amount of production of computer is very high. So the length of the linear segment is very high, like OK 1 star. Then what will happen? Then you see, and if the home country is large, so the equilibrium occurs at point T. So is there any gap? Is there any difference between the pre-trade and post-trade terms of trade for the foreign country? No, these are just the same. So you remember in chapter 2 also we discussed that only if this post-trade price lies strictly in between the pre-trade prices, such trade will be mutually beneficial, right? But if for one country this is equal, this country will not enjoy any gains from trade. So this is what happening here. PF is equal to PS star. So that's why the foreign country is not enjoying any gains from trade. But now suppose, so in this case, the entire gains from trade is going to the home country. Now you see, if you now change the assumption further and you consider that foreign country, this large dealing with a very large home country, so that you have equally elongated stretch of the offer curve for the home country also, then what will happen? What do you think? Then what will happen? So suppose this is now home country's offer curve. Okay. So you have a linear segment which is equally more or less higher, and then you have a non-linear segment, and the two countries offer curve are intersecting at point E2. So new terms of trade. So what do you think? Now will the countries gain? What do you think? Will the countries now gain if both the countries are now very large? Then your what will happen? The post-trade terms of trade will lie strictly in between the pre-trade prices of both the countries. This is no longer equal, right? Isn't it? OE2 will lie in between the autarkic prices of both the countries, right? So are both the countries gaining? Now both the countries are very large. So if the home country is also very large, that means if the too much amount of computer, that foreign country will be able to sell that computer. And if the home production of textile is very high, then what will happen? If the foreign country's demand for textile is very large, it can meet its demand for textile by importing from the large home country. So that means if the country's relative sizes are not very different, then only the two countries can enjoy gains from trade. But if the country sizes are asymmetric, so it's not that whenever a country is large, it's not gaining from trade. But if both the countries, the sizes are not very asymmetric, they can enjoy the gains from trade. But if the two countries which are trading with each other, the size is very asymmetric. So one country is large, another country is small. Then in the Ricardian framework, the large country is not gaining. So is it clear what is the difference between this first case when we discussed that only one country is large? Now you change the assumption and you assume that both the countries are large. In that case, both the countries are gaining. Okay. And you will also see that you will get the similar type of conclusion in the Heckscher-Ohlin model also. In the Heckscher-Ohlin model, we get some important factor price equalization theorem, which tells that in the Heckscher-Ohlin model also, you'll see that only the final goods are traded, like in the Ricardian model. There is no movement of labor across the two countries, right? What is happening? Only the goods are being exported and imported. Same thing in the Heckscher-Ohlin model, but in the Heckscher-Ohlin model, you will see that after trade opens up and you have the post-trade relative price, you will see that the relative factor price in the two countries will be the same, which is a very strong result, factor price equalization theorem. But we'll find out that we need some conditions. The condition, one of the conditions should not be very different in terms of their endowment, like a very large country and a very small country, like a rich country and a poor country, say US or Canada, and a very small country like an African country. Because if the endowments are very different, then factor prices will not be the same. So if the countries, the partners are very different from each other, the gains from trade is not realized. So for gains from trade to be realized, the partners should be of relatively similar size. Okay, and that's very important. You see the successful RTs, regional trade agreements. The trade agreements, they are more or less formed among similar members, and those are which are successful, like NAFTA. So US, Canada, Mexico. But you have many RTAs which are not that successful, like India doesn't have much successful trade agreements. So if you are trading with asymmetric countries, then the gains from, so this is the result. So if we just go back, so the main conclusion in the Ricardian model, so if we don't distinguish between the size of the country, so if the country sizes are relatively similar, not very asymmetric, then we see that complete specialization is the solution, and that follows from the assumption of constant cost, and constant cost is followed from the assumption of constant opportunity cost, that is fixed coefficient CRS and the long run supply. So with this constant cost, your PPF is a straight line, and the post-trade situation, the countries are completely specialized, and you have a linear segment in your offer curve. So as long as these linear segments in the offer curve are more or less of equal magnitude, both the countries are gaining from trade, because the post-trade relative price lies in between the pre-trade relative prices. Okay, but if the countries' relative sizes are very different from one another, then the post-trade terms of trade of one country will coincide with the pre-trade terms of trade of the country, and that country will not realize any gains from trade. because gains from trade arises from the fact of that the post trade prices are different from the pre trade price. But if in the post trade situation your price is not different, then what is your gain? No gain. Okay, so that is the conclusion. Now there are many extensions in the Ricardian model also. So this one we studied the standard one, which is two country, two commodity, two factors of production. Now you can also see there are very important extensions like the Dornbusch Fisher Samuelson paper 1976 AER paper, which has a continuum good structure 0 to 1. See, if you 0 to 1, there are how many points? Infinite. So continuum good structure Ricardian model, that means you have many goods and you also have the many country extension. So but in one semester we don't have the time to study all the extensions. If any student is interested, I can share the papers or you can look at the textbooks for the extensions. Okay.